Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. Here we are on part 2 of a 3-part series. Driveway, double RV access, front patio stamp, sand wash concrete. This has almost a little bit of everything in it. So as you can see here, we have no dobies underneath the rebar. But what we're doing is we're pulling it up as we go out. I have one guy manning the rebar just for that purpose. Now, because that was a really small dish around that particular drain, and we do have decent slope to the front driveway or the front sidewalk, this is going to be just a real small bowl around this drain. That's why they were able to pull it off with that straight screed board instead of running a 4-footer around it like you might see somewhere else, or a more severe drainage situation. They just dished it with a hand float, basically. That's what that boils down to. Now you can see we went perpendicular to the rod on the bull float there. We also we ran it both ways, basically. Now that's ideal. If you can run your bull float perpendicular to your rod, you're getting a really good flat surface. Some situations, like when we start going down this other side yard that we're boxed in between the house and wall, it's not going to happen that way. So the bull float's going to go one direction, so the rod guy's got to be really good. Now what I found nice about pulling that number 3 rebar up, if you give it a quick whip, you kind of bit a little bend in the rebar and it doesn't go back down. Now this is a 3000 PSI, and we threw a ½ pound of fiber mesh per yard in here. You can go anywhere from a ½ pound per yard all the way up to 3 pounds. But since we're going to be doing a sand wash on this, I didn't want to do a high ratio of fiber because I'd really have basically a lot of peach hair. We still had a little bit on the surface after we pressure washed, but not too bad. It wasn't real visible unless you were laying down looking at it from ground view. Then you could see everything. Just look at that nice trowel work on the edges. Now that screed they're using there happened to have some notches in it. There's really no purpose for screeding to have those notches other than it did lighten the actual 2x4, so it made a light screed board, lightweight screed board. So something to consider for sure. If you want to lighten up your screed board, just take some notches out of it here and there. A little parkway addition here to the side of the approach. And what we did, because they had that drain pipe going through there and it was probably only 2 inches below surface, we actually thickened the concrete all the way around that drainage pipe. That way you'd have more support around the outside edge of the pipe, so it may not crack across the top of it. That's the idea there. But here's your walking edger. Now he's running it backwards just to clean the edge. And now once you've done that, you flip your edger back over, and now you can walk forward. So we poured 20 yards between the 2 side yards and driveway. It was 20 yards, and that was the max that they can carry out here legally. Road weight restrictions and stuff. And it was just enough to get it done too. We had, I think we had to blow the hose to have enough concrete. Actually, we had to fill up the hopper and the pump just to bleed the lines so we'd have enough concrete. Here's your joiner action off the corner of the house. Although we're going to be saw cutting the majority of this job, we're going to have to get something just to hold it overnight, because if you don't get those corners cut the day of the pour, you could come back the next morning, you're going to have some cracks off of them. So we try to wet joint those, and then we can come back the next day, snap a lot of lines, and go start cutting it up. Now right here, as we were standing down the street, we noticed there may have been a little hump here in the corner. So we broke out the old 6-foot Milwaukee screed level, and made sure that we were getting slope towards the front, and we knocked the hump out. Basically what happened there is the break point at the end of the house went beyond the corner of the house. It went out a little bit further, so we had to cut the edge out a little bit. That was the funny trowel on there. So we went from magnesium bowl float, then we went fiberglass funny float, then we went big blue, and then we went funny trowel. Then we'll go hand trowels and knee boards. And that's all in about a 5-hour process, including the laydown. We have 3,000 psi here. We're pouring on road base. That's been well saturated from the rainstorms, so it's ideal situation. So what we're going to do here, once we get this all troweled out and it looks real nice and there's not a lot of visible lines in it, trowel lines, we're going to spray some retardant on here. And what that retardant will do is will stop the surface from drying at a certain depth, depending on how much. Well, what we used to use before the retardants came along, I mean, Rugasol I think was the first one I used, and then they started coming out with variations of 1s through 5s of depth of penetration for the retardant. So this is a 3, right in the medium range of penetration of retardant of the surface. And what that does is we rinse the surface, and it only goes, that stuff penetrates so deep, so it'll take that much of the surface off, so you're exposing either the sand, or at some point you're going to be getting into the rock. Because on concrete, as you work it, most of your aggregate sinks, or it gets worked down and the cream comes up. And with that, you have your sand and your cements at the surface. So you use this here. It's made by it's called Top Cast. We're using a number 3. And that's going to get sprayed on right after a trowel finish without a lot of lines on it. Apparently on the directions you can use just a hand float finish on these and spray it. That way this stuff really penetrates well. Now on a sealed surface with the trowel, it may not penetrate as well, but I haven't had any problem with it. I normally trowel it and spray it. But if you're going with a deep, like exposed aggregate, probably a hand float finish or a bowl float finish would be enough. But this is a very light wash, so you got to get it pretty tight. So when you rinse the surface, you don't see a lot of bowl float lines, trowel lines, hand float marks, stuff like that. Now on the instructions of this particular product, it shows, I think it covered the coverage between 1 and 300 square feet per gallon. I usually just put about double of what they recommend on there. So if I have to buy 15 gallons for a particular job, I'll buy 30 and just spray it twice. Because basically what you want to do is not see any gray. You want the whole thing to look just white, bone white. If it doesn't look bone white, then you haven't sprayed enough on there. Now, what happens if it's not white and you have some gray spots? That means that you don't have that retardant there. So when you come back the next day to try to pressure wash it, you're going to have problems trying to get that off where you don't have the retardant sprayed on there. But that can be solved. But now you got to go get some other equipment, and that's a floor buffer. A floor buffer with nylon bristles, and you utilize that. So you got an extra guy with that, and you got the pressure washer guy, then you got the other equipment that you may not have, you have to rent. So there's that option. That's an emergency situation though. But anyway, I was saying about the sugar and water. That's how we used to do it before they had this top cast or something similar to these things. You just add sugar to water, put it in a pump up sprayer, spray the surface, and now you just killed the concrete on the surface. Depending on how much sugar you put on it, gives you the depth of how deep it's going to go. And I think the way that was discovered is a guy drinking a soft drink or some other beverage out on a job site on knee boards, maybe spilled it while he was troweling. He came back and he goes, wow, the concrete's still soft here. What is this? And this is how they just found surface retardants. But here's the next day, and you can see as we walk over it, it actually tracks up like you're walking on snow. So every step you take, you're pulling the surface right off with you, every footprint. So you know it's working well if that happens. Now in a really warm weather climate, you can just rinse these right after you get done troweling it. Just use a water hose with no nozzle, no direct spray, and just start rinsing it the same day. If you're in the right climate area, like Las Vegas, for instance, very hot, depending on the year, but you know it's hot for about probably a good 8 months a year, 8 months out of the year. So you can pretty much pull off a rinse same day. And then not only that, you're going to prevent shrinkage cracks by rinsing it the same day because you're flooding it with water. So you're killing two birds with one stone. All of a sudden you've got a concrete curing compound, water. You've rinsed the surface to give a decorative look, and everybody's happy. Same can be said here. Even in this climate, you're getting a lot of water on it the very next day. Plus you've got a couple storms coming in right behind this rinse, so it worked out really nice. The nice thing about this retardant versus the sugar water retardant, you don't know where you really sprayed the sugar water because it's clear. That's the advantage of this particular product. You can actually see where you've sprayed it already. We had 2 pressure washers going because I found if you don't catch these early in the next day on your rinse, it gets harder and harder to remove the surface. Now here's your fiber mesh, like I was telling you about earlier about the peach fuzz on the surface. A lot of it we just blew right off. Now here's your layout on your saw cuts. And I got my new knee pads on here, spring loaded. Hi, David Odell here with Odell Complete Concrete. I got these new knee pads sent to me from a vendor that I met at World of Concrete. Basically, they have They have springs on the inside of it. So I'm going to try it out today, saw cutting. They're real comfortable. They're great for flat surfaces. Probably not so good on rocks and stuff because it's a hard surface here, so it might roll over on you on something hard like rocks. But on the ground, on a flat surface, they're really great, man. When you go down on them like this, you could feel the shocks. You really don't even feel like you're going down on your knees at all. Man, they ought to put springs in shoes next. That'd be good. But anyway, you can get, if you want to get these, you can get 10% off by going to the website,
Recoil 360 is what these are, and you can get them. You can get 10% off by typing in Odell 10. That'll get you 10% off through their website. Anyway, I'm gonna start saw cutting now, and have a good one.
That's some nice slow-mo action on that skill saw there. That's just a 7-inch diamond blade, and it cuts like butter when you catch them the next day. So we're going an inch deep, and you can see that knee pad right there, how that spring's absorbing the shock. However, if I was to get up and down a lot, they would just fall to my ankle, and that'd be kind of a bummer. Now we're laying out the other side of this driveway. So the first thing in the morning, I got a couple cuts in before I even laid out everything. So I just hit some severe crack points, basically. Because I've seen them crack while you're out there getting ready to saw cut, and all of a sudden, pop, you feel the slab move, and you're out there cutting. Now it's too late. We're using the CVS masks here, which are really nice. A lot better than getting waterboarded with the old paper ones. That's after sweating and stuff and condensation in the mask, and it gets wet and you're just gasping for air. So we did the initial rinse to expose the sand. Now we saw cut. Now we're going to get all the cement residue from the saw cuts off, and the easiest way is with a pressure washer. You can scrub and broom, and next thing you know, when it dries, it's still there if you use a water hose. So pressure washer, it gets all that residue off. So when the concrete dries out, a lot of times you can't see that residue when it's wet. And then when it dries, it comes back. But here it is. It's a really nice, even sand wash finish. I didn't even modify the mix. I mean, a lot of people will modify the mix on these sand washes and throw some extra sand in there, which means, you've got less PSI, of course. And then they get more uniform sand wash, but you kind of weaken the concrete by doing that. So I give it the basic. Give me the basic mix, and we'll just make it work. Now this is just natural gray. So this is your next day after pour. This is going to cure out real light, and then we're going to hit it with some really good solids, a lot of solids and some sealer that we got, and it's going to really make it pop. And what happens after it gets light, the concrete, and then you hit it with the good lacquer-based wet look, it'll actually pull out a little brown out of it, a little tan color. Now we went through a lot of things on the design of these saw. Initially, one day we had borders going all the way around, tool cut. And then one day we had saw cut borders going around it. And then we had 45-degree grid on the patio at one point with a border. And then we had an entry separation cut. We had a lot of different things, but basically when it was all said and done, we just went with a basic clean look here that works for everybody. Oh, I forgot to mention those 4x4 brackets we wet set, because there will be a little fence and gate going across there to conceal that pool equipment. So that was just a mono pour thickened edge, drop the straps in. Anyway, thank you for watching the video. Stay tuned for part 3. This was a part 2 of a 3-part series. Subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when we upload it. Hit the like button if you like these kind of videos, especially the ones that I do. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.